Bulabinak and welcome to this week's program of Speak Your Mind, live on 100.2 FM, Gold FM, and also Mbula, also to our viewers who are watching the delayed coverage on FBC TV on Tuesday night and Wednesday morning. I'm Wame Valentine. Joining us today on the program is the coordinator of the Fiji Women's Crisis Center, the FWCC, Ms. Shamima Ali. Bulabinak to you and welcome back.
Thank you very much.
Now, we'll open up the phone lines for the convenience of those who are listening into this radio station. This is live on radio only, 3220-906 and 3220-907. Should you wish to be a part of the discussion that Miss Ali and I will be having today, by all means, call us up and we'll put you on air. That's the direct line into the studio, 3220-906. I'll jump straight into it, Miss Ali. Sexual assault, obviously, is a subject that most folks really do not wish to touch with a 10-foot pole, much less talk about. But really, it's an issue and an issue that we need to address. I realize this, and I don't know whether you've realized this as well, Miss Ali, but recently it has been almost a weekly trend where we are reading cases of sexual assault. In the past, it used to be, months, then we read about it or hear about it in the media. But as of late, it seems to be a weekly trend now. It is a bit alarming.
Yes, it is very alarming. Well, for us, it has been alarming since we started about 28 years ago. But what we're seeing now, we would not consider that as a drastic increase, though there might be some increases. What we would attribute that to is increased reporting, because contrary to when we started, nobody wanted to talk about it. You hardly heard people talking about it. You could hardly hear it on the radio and so on. But now many more people have taken up the cudgels against violence against women and rape and sexual assault and so on. So people are getting a lot more confidence. The police are doing a lot more work on it, and the police services have improved somewhat. And there are many more organizations, not only the Crisis Center, but other NGOs, CSOs, which are working in this area, in the community particularly. So there's a lot more raising of awareness, and people are beginning to know their rights, and the community itself is realizing that this is just not on.
And people are beginning to know their rights thanks to the work of FWCC and other NGOs, as you've mentioned. Of the sexual assault that has happened, Miss Ali, what is the percentage of the sexual assault that we are hearing or that has been reported? Is it a significant percentage?
No, not at all. We still believe, and our research will also show that what we're seeing is only the tip of the iceberg. We believe that it's 10%. If not less than that we are actually seeing being reported. The rest of the 90% never see the light of day.
10% of what we read in the papers and hear in the news is just, this is extraordinary. So what should folks do? This is something important. Obviously, you said this is the stigma or the stigma surrounding this issue, I would imagine, which is the reason why most victims do not wish to come out and mention this or report it to the cases. So if it is the stigma, then for those of us, what signs can we see so that we can pick up and assist those who have been sexually assaulted?
I had a very, very enlightening experience a week ago. A young man walked into my office and said that his sister who was a schoolgirl, had been sexually assaulted in the weekend. And he had done everything, and this is a real change. Usually the brothers and the father would beat up the girl and say, why were you there at this time and that time, But the change in attitude is reflected in that this young man walked in. He must have been in his late 20s. And he said, I really want to help my sister. This has happened. I've been to the police. Everything is under control there. They have referred me here. And what can you do? And so we told him we could do counseling and so on. He said, all right, by the time she gets here, in between, what do we do as a family to assist her? And that was such a great thing. And that is so rare to see. And that is the kind of attitude we must have, the family support. If this happens, first of all, of course, it should not happen. If it happens, that kind of support, the community not pointing a finger at the person to whom it has happened, the survivor, and giving that person a lot of support, and pointing the person in the right direction, reporting to the police, giving support through that, and so on. And while we can do that for the event when it has happened, there are many things we can do to actually prevent this kind of things happening within our own communities. And that is having a change of mind about girls and about women, their behavior, their dress, and so on. We have to stop looking at women and girls when they get raped and say, because it's because of the dress, it's because of their behavior, as if women and girls can prevent rape. We can't. It's only the men and the boys who have to stop raping and the society which has to stop supporting a culture where sexual assault and rape is condoned and the victim actually gets the blame for it.
We'll talk about that in a moment, how women usually are seen as the issue and not those who actually commit these heinous acts. But I was reading about this in the dailies recently, about a young girl, probably 15, maybe younger, 14, 15, 16, at about that age, who was at a drinking party. I believe this happened on New Year's Eve, and she got raped by a number of men. And this was obviously disturbing news for us to broadcast here in the studio. And a lot of folks said, well, it was her fault. What is a 15-year-old girl doing, drinking in a group of men? Would you say the same thing?
Not at all, regardless of where she was. It is the man who raped her. She did not go, because rape, let us get this very straight. What is a rape? A rape is a humiliating, degrading, sexual act of violence committed upon a person's body. Totally humiliating for her, taking away her bodily integrity and so on. I'm going to say she and her because most of the rapes happen to females, though there are men also who get raped, and we can talk about that later. So it is, and no woman or no girl asks for that kind of thing. So if a girl goes drinking, she trusts those guys that she went out with, not looking for rape, for that humiliating experience. She might like one of the guys, it's a mutual attraction, and so on, but not looking for that kind of experience. She hasn't gone there. She's gone there to have a good time, to drink. I mean, that's the culture around us. Look around us. That's what people do. They drink and enjoy themselves and so on. So she, again, I would never say, the crisis center would never say, and it is not true that she asked for it. She went to have a good time, drinking, talking, laughing, dancing, whatever, not to be humiliated in the manner that she was, and degraded and violated.
A prominent individual was in the media lately accused of sexual assault, and an overwhelming majority of individuals pointed at the woman, mentioned that it was her fault, she was the one who tempted him, things of that nature. That seems to be the culture of most folks, not only in Fiji, but really around the world.
Around the world. You might think that perhaps the Western countries don't have that. We have very recent reports of how magistrates have behaved to victims of sexual violence and so on. Definitely, that was totally uncalled for, and that is the kind of behavior we have to stop. We have to start looking at the victims to whom it is happening, and we have to stop protecting these men. It doesn't mean that just because the perpetrator is somebody prominent or has a high status in society or has a lot of money and power that he cannot do these acts. Anyone can do this act. And if you look at the profiles of perpetrators, it covers almost everyone, from the unemployed, from the dock worker, right up to leaders, politicians, church leaders, everyone else, professionals.
Binaka Miss Ali, we'll take a break and we'll continue with this discussion right here on Speak Your Mind. And we're back with the coordinator of the Fiji Women's Crisis Center, Shamima Ali, joins us today. 3220-906 and 907. Earlier on, before we went to a break, Miss Ali, you mentioned how people need to go past the mindset and change the mentality of saying that women, you brought this act upon yourself because of the way you dressed. I would imagine, and of course, you have done workshops in rural parts around the country, and I understand there was workshops done extensively as well in Vonolevu. When you mentioned this to folks, especially in the rural setting, how did they receive this?
Well, initially, of course, they come in with all those myths that it is the girl's fault, and some communities forbid women from wearing pants, saying that it tempts men and so on. So when we start showing them the profiles of victims, who is getting raped? Is it just the women who wear these kind of dresses and so on and so forth? That kind of reasoning, when we start saying women with disabilities, children as young as 10 months, 10 months, 3 years, 2 years, women as old as 90 years, 70 years, 60 years, wearing sulu and chamba, saris, salwar kameez, or just a t-shirt and shorts, all kinds of women, if you look at the profiles of victims. So that makes sense to people when we start giving stark statistics, data to them that these are the people who get raped, not the women wearing pants only or shorts or going out at night. They get raped in their own homes, going to the river to wash clothes, going to the fields to get produce, in the workplace, in schools, and everywhere else, anywhere you name it. The risk factor here is being a female most of the time. So when we start reasoning that way, at the end of it, people do come around and say, see, these are the things we never knew. We don't think of it like that. They just think women, it's their fault because, it comes from Eve the temptress, that women are always the temptress. So it's a very religious kind of thing that women are the ones who are always tempting. So what happens is the focus moves away from the perpetrators. And that is why this crime has been allowed to continue and has continued for so long, because we keep looking in the wrong direction to straighten things out. We tell women, don't wear clothes like this, don't do that, don't go out at night, And in fact, if you keep saying the don'ts to women to avoid rape, in the end, we have to say just one last sentence, cease to exist. And then you don't get raped. But then you have necrophilia, where they rape also corpses of dead women. That has also happened, during disaster times and so on, during the tsunamis and so on. So when are women safe? Even dead women aren't safe. So we have to shift our attention from the victims, from the women, to who are doing it and how do we change that behavior.
How about, let's do that. I mean, it's awfully disturbing. I mean, that statement that you made, even dead women aren't safe. We've been talking a lot about the women, and you've been a vocal champion for women's rights in this country for decades. With all these really disturbing reports that really turns your stomach. I mean, what's going on? Really, that's the question. You mentioned about a case that involved a 10-month-old child, a 2-year-old little girl, a 90-year-old woman. What's going on in the community, or what's going on in the mentality of most men?
Well, you see...
Or should I say some men, not most men?
Yeah, the men who do this kind of things. Well, generally, there is this whole idea that we grow up with that women are somehow inferior. The females are somehow inferior. They are there to do for us, for the men, They are supposed to cater for men all the time. That's how they are brought up. As soon as a girl starts growing up, hey, go and learn to cook. That's where you're going to end up, in the kitchen. They have nothing else to do, but they're always brought up to be with a man at the end of the line, when they grow up and so on. And the kind of things that we expect from girls to do and boys to do. Boys are given a lot of freedom to go out, to choose, or freedom of choice and things like that. And everything is done for them, from the father, the uncle, the grandfather, and then when the brothers start coming in, So there is this idea forms in men's mind or boys' mind that women, that's what they are there for. Then if it is a family where there's a patriarch, like the man is ruling the roost, and the way he interacts with the women in the family, starting from his wife, the son is watching that kind of behavior. So when the son that's what he's learning, because he doesn't have any other role model. The role model is in his house. That's the father is the one that often they look up to. So then he sees his mother getting humiliated, being ordered around, and never fighting back. The girl is watching that. So the girl's tolerance also is quite high of this kind of behavior. And the boy is growing up thinking, this is the way to be. We are the bosses. They have to say yes. So, and it carries on. If I want sex with you, you have no right to say no, and you have no right to fight back. And if I want it, I'm going to get it. And then, it's the power, the sense of power that is enjoyed, humiliating a being, that a human being that you find is actually not as strong as you, is inferior to you, have grown up believing that. So it's about gender inequalities, it's about the status of women and girls in our society, and the kind of ideas we actually breed in our own homes, in our own communities, and so on. A lot of things are changing, but you just have to get out a little bit into the interior of the country. And even if I walk out of Suva, just a few kilometers away, I'll find that kind of attitude there also.
Let's talk about religion and what religion plays in this. Obviously, most people in this country are religious, and what most religions teach is that women are to be submissive. They are to listen. You do not speak. Whatever your mate, whatever your spouse, your partner, your husband says, that you go with that. What is your view on that? Because usually that sort of ideology brings about certain cases, as you've mentioned. I want it, I'll get it.
Yes, exactly. Man as the head of the household, women be submissive, those things. And they were always thrown at us. But the good thing is, like my staff and I, we go a lot into the community and have discussions around these issues. Less and less we are hearing those things about, this is what the Bible says. Very few people nowadays say that. When we first started the Crisis Center in 1984, that is what we heard all the time. It's the Bible, this is our religion, you cannot interfere. So a lot of people would shy away from, it's the religion, we cannot. No. But what we do, we take it all head on. So we also have people at the center who have looked at the Bible. So if it says women be submissive, then what is the role of the man? Is it just a one-way traffic or the other way? Because the Bible also asks the man to submit to his wife, to do things for his wife, to keep his family happy. It's a two-way situation. If he is the head of the household, though I don't believe that, but the Bible says that, but if he is, and if you take him as that is, the religious people would, then he has got responsibilities to his family. Don't go out drinking. Spend as much time as possible with your family. Provide for your family. Respect your family, and etc., etc. Don't go running around having too many kitchens and having affairs and so on. Those are responsibilities. So when we are teaching, we also talk about these things. And a lot of people start seeing sense because they only, people are only taught one way, just the one-way traffic, men, 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 because, of course, the Bible, most of the teachers of religion are males, and often they promulgate ideas and continue doing that which will be beneficial to them. And they have never sat down and looked at the other side of things. So many religions, Islam, Hinduism, Christianity, there are many women who are working from within the religion. You have got women living under the veil, and so on. So these are women who are challenging religion and saying, it's for all of us, not for you. So, but religion has, for most part, and continues to subjugate women because it is taught wrongly. And I can say that very clearly. It is misinterpreted because all religions are based on human rights and they respect women and men equally. It talks about equality and so on. And if you look at that, then there's a lot of improvement, for example, in the Anglican Church. They have a wonderful program. They have a House of Sarah. They have a male advocacy program. They have undergone training with us and elsewhere in New Zealand and so on. They have a real good program, and they have sustained that program. And it's not just a one-off thing, and it's moving all around Fiji. So while there are religious institutions, organizations that are doing some work, but I would say, and particularly the new wave ones that are coming in that are quite patriarchal. And, they say, why do we need a women's movement? If men did their duty, and the man's duty is to be the patriarch kind of thing. And we don't want that either, because patriarchy also abuses human rights and so on. So, that kind of thinking. So, they have a lot of work to do. They need to learn, and they have a lot of work to do, and they can be very, very influential in stopping violence against women and girls.
All right, Vinaka Ms. Ali, we'll take another break and we'll return with more on Speak Your Mind. And we're back with Shamima Ali, the coordinator for the Fiji Women's Crisis Center. You could visit their website, which is fijiwomen.com. That's fijiwomen.com. We're speaking about sexual assault, and not just sexual assault. We'll also be speaking about sexual harassment very shortly. In previous legislation, Ms. Ali, rape was quite narrowly defined, but now it's been broadened. It means quite a lot of things now. It includes a lot of things. What does rape mean now?
It means, in the old definition, it was just penile vaginal penetration. And all the other types of sexual assaults carried a lesser sentence, and it was treated less seriously. And those are anal rape, rape through the anus, with anything, with a penis or an object, oral rape, forced oral sex. That also now is included of using objects, sticks, cassava sticks, whatever, that people use, bottles and so on. So anything where there is penetration, whether through the mouth, anus, vagina, it's now deemed rape, and it is treated just as seriously as penile vaginal rape.
Your view on stalking, is that considered an offense as well? Obviously we can't look at that as a sexual assault or sexual harassment, but that in most cases could lead to it.
Well, it is sexual harassment if you are stalking someone, and especially if you're stalking a woman, and for what motive? kind of thing, that can be, it's generally harassment, but sexual harassment is if a man with a particular purpose is following a woman around, a female around, and so on. Yeah. So no, definitely not allowed. And I would just say to people, if you see somebody you don't know that person, is around you too much, you feel someone is peeping in through your window or is, somewhere around you, and this is the person that keeps occurring around you and has no business being there, you must report to the police. It is quite serious.
With the advent of technology, people are now using the internet. They're using social networking sites. They're using mobile phones to sexually harass or intimidate other individuals. For those who have been intimidated by these means, what could they do?
They definitely, well, you can come to the Fiji Women's Crisis Center at any one of our branches. Call us if you don't want to be identified. You can call us on our 24-hour line, and we can, talk to you, see what the problem is, what is concerning you. But definitely you can report to the police, because I think there are quite good laws around these things now. Stalking, sexual harassment, and social media. I think we need to do a bit of work around that and legislation. But definitely it can come under any of the categories.
You mentioned about reporting to the police. In your view, how do you think the police has responded recently, or what is your view of the police response of sexual assaults and harassment recently?
There has been a lot of improvement. There has been a lot of work over the last 10, 15 years that has gone into the police force, particularly the sexual offences unit. The police made a very definite, concerted effort to get police trained over the years. The Crisis Center has been involved in police training for many, many years. And they had that at the academy. I don't know if they any longer have it there. We haven't been there for a long time. But definitely they had it in the curriculum to get them all trained and so on. And the sexual offences unit in Suva is doing excellent work. And I hear that, and there's a domestic violence unit at the Namaka police station. The officer in command there is one of our male advocates and has done wonderful work in Nandi in terms of elimination of violence against women and girls. So, and other police I hear are being trained to be stationed at actually various police stations and so on, and that'll be a good thing. And but again, those attitudes also permeate throughout the police force about women asking for it, not treating sexual assault as seriously as it should be, as the serious crime that it is. So while a lot of improvement has happened, there are a lot of good police officers, we are still having problems around some police stations, some police officers who are not responding appropriately to women and girls who go and report. And that is why a lot of the cases get dropped at that stage. They don't see the light of day, they don't reach the courts and so on because of the responses some, and I emphasize that, some police officers have towards sexual assault and rape and so on.
We've managed to touch on the authorities, their response to rape and sexual assault, and by authorities I mean the police. Let's look at the response of really the legal system. What do you think about the sentencing of those who commit these heinous acts? Some say it's inconsistent.
There are various things around legislation. While we can have, and we do have, a good sets of legislation around violence against women and sexual assault and so on, with the crimes decree and etc. We have to have implementation. We have the resources to implement those laws. Then we also have to have a judiciary that is trained and made aware of those laws. They have to be gender sensitized, particularly crimes of violence against women and girls. They have to do that. And while some are, we are still having, a lot of things have improved, let me say that, over the last 20 years that I have been working in this area. A lot of things have improved, but there's still a lot left to be done in terms of cases coming to court, quickly, particularly sexual assault, because people to whom it happens, they want to get on with their lives, and they need to get on with their lives, and we need to encourage them to get on with their lives. And one of the ways in which it can be done, if we have a fast legal system that addresses these issues, trained officers who are doing this, DPP that is efficient, and so on. It is. I'm not saying that it is not, but a lot more improvement needs to be done. So you have that. Then you have the sentencing. When you have a legislation that very clearly spells out zero tolerance, that this the authorities have zero tolerance, this legislation has zero tolerance, then sentencing needs to match that, that zero tolerance. So we still have, while there has been a lot of improvement, once again, there are still inconsistencies in sentencing. So, you still see, I've been reading the papers, and you read about an 18-month suspended sentence for attempted rape. Attempted rape. If somebody hadn't intervened, that person would have raped. Why a suspended sentence? Why do we have 3 years for sexually harassing, touching, and touching someone's private parts? Why do we have 3 years? Why doesn't that guy get the maximum sentencing, which is allowed in the courts? For rape and sexual assault, the maximum sentence is a life sentence. Does anyone get that? So there's some, and then if they get like even 10 years, which is a good sentence, then they come out after serving part of that on good behavior and other programs that are there in the prisons. Our question would be, who is working with them to change their mind, their thinking, their attitude, so that when they come out, they're rehabilitated, they're re-educated, and they will never do it again. So something should also happen in prison, not just the Bible and all those things, motivational classes and so on. In terms of sexual violence, people who are there for sexual violence, they need to undergo a re-education. And I believe that in Lambasa, the correctional services are working with the Lambasa Women's Crisis Center to start a program of that nature.
Let's talk about that when we come back, right after this short break. And we're back. The website for the Fiji Women's Crisis Center, fijiwomen.com. That's women with WOMEN.com for latest updates regarding activities and also workshops, plus more that's happening at the Fiji Women's Crisis Center. Shamima Ali, the coordinator, joins me today. Before we went to a break, you spoke about how rehabilitation needs to step up in most prisons in this country. And for the good half an hour of this program, we've been mentioning, we've been talking about the victims, but let's for just a minute or two, move our focus to those who commit these acts. What needs to be done? You've mentioned about the Lambasa prison. They're working with FWCC in Lambasa. Do you think other prison centers around the country should follow Lambasa's lead?
I really think that they should. And we're very prepared to do that kind of work with them, because we really don't want, a lot of sexual offenders are recidivists. They do come out and do it again. So it is in our interest also to work with it. So if allowed to, if asked to, we definitely would do something like that. But also we are, for prevention work, I have mentioned before, we have the male advocacy program, male advocacy for women's human rights. And that program, I think, is a very good one. It's actually coined by us. That whole phrase is coined by us. It's also developed by us, the Fiji Women's Crisis Center and the Pacific Women's Network Against Violence Against Women. And it's being used throughout the Pacific. Vanuatu, it's working very well. And what it does is it actually identifies influential men. So it's our traditional leaders, the chiefs and so on, police, policymakers, young men, youth leaders and so on, and takes them through a period of training so that they can then influence other men's behavior, not to change their own behavior first. So it's a real good program. At the first week, they just look at themselves, and there is a lot of regret that I conduct these programs, and there is a lot of regret. They go through several stages, and we've got quite a few men who are not working at the crisis center, but working in their own areas of work and spreading the message and trying to influence other men. We will be targeting young men. We really need to look at young men, and because that's where the formation, the mind formation is happening. But also, we have to do something about pornography and what people have access to, because now, the kind of sexual stuff that people have, on access to through social media, through internet and so on, because that does influence people. And it also influences young women for a higher tolerance of various kinds of sexual acts that they actually don't want to do, but do to be in the gang, with the gang and so on, and what young men are demanding of young women, the kind of sexual acts that are being demanded of them, totally demeaning, humiliating, and so on. So we have to be, all those areas. It's a huge area now. While we were still grappling before this whole advent of the internet and so on, and the easy access to it. We were just grappling with everything that was going on and trying to say maybe it's this, and the other. This thing has come full on, and many of our young men and women have access to it. So I would also, and to people who are actually, if we know of people who are doing it in our communities, we doing sexually harassing girls or women, and we see any behavior that's inappropriate, it's for us also to have that knowledge and be able to stand up to these people and not to let it pass because it's not happening to my daughter, it's not happening to my wife, it's not happening to my sister, it's happening to somebody else. And everyone's wife, wife, sister, mother, daughter belongs to the community, and we all have a responsibility. So, looking out for this kind of behavior, any man or boy who behaves inappropriately, it's our responsibility to stand up and say, this is not the way to behave, and so on. So there are many things that we can do. But with men, I just believe a total change in behavior, attitude, thinking about women has to take place before we can even start to think about stopping all forms of violence, and particularly sexual violence against women and girls.
Now let's talk about the resources available for those who are victims of this. You mentioned about the unit here in Suva, but a number of cases come from rural areas, outside of Suva, from places like Lambasa and other places around the country, where sadly they do not have the resources that the people in Suva have regarding the unit at the police force. What should be done about this? So why are we lacking? What do you think we need to do regarding bringing resources to other areas instead of just Suva?
Okay. There are a lot of... let's start with the police. Most cases of sexual assault are reported to the police because they are everywhere, more places than all of us. But most of these police stations are not, particularly on the islands, in the interiors and so on. They are not well resourced. Yes, and they're not trained, most probably not trained.
To handle these issues, at least.
Handle these issues. Fortunately, there are some police officers who have their ears and eyes open, and they will call us, from like an island in Laos or somewhere, and say, please, can you help us with this or that, so and so on. So once they call us, then we are, on the ball. Do whatever we can, liaise with whoever we need to, even go out there, or if they are coming in, we'll wait for them and so on. But so those resources are needed. If you're in an island, you need a boat to get around. So if, for example, if you're in Ngau, and something happens somewhere in Natavanandi, or let's say in Sawayeke, and you have to, from Natavanandi, the boat will come. So how is he going to get, that police officer, he or she, going to get from that village to this village? Are there boats available? Is there diesel available? Do they have an engine that is working? The road transport is very bad in those kind of places, so we need to decentralize a lot more with the resources, working phones, fax machines, whatever needs to be. So that's one area. In terms of counseling, the crisis center is in Lambasa. The crisis center is in Ba, Nandi, and Rakiraki, and Suva, of course. So, we are in some of the major districts. We're hoping to move on to Savusavu or Taviuni, one of those places where the request will come from, and also mobile counseling and so on. There are also some groups. We have got a network of violence against women, so in the villages and so on, we have committees against violence against women, one in Koro and one in Nandi. So we're going to move into Kandavu and so on later on. So these are the contact people where they will be trained and they're put there. There are other counseling services like Empower Pacific, which is which counsels on everything, and violence against women and girls and children is also included in their program, I believe. So there are them. If anything else, if nothing else in the rural areas, I would advise people to call our 24-hour line, call the police 24-hour line. A lot of people complain about that one, but you can still try that one. But also go to your nearest social welfare, health centers, use all these people and ask them to contact the crisis center, whoever, if they don't have the resources. But I can tell you, and that a lot more resources, a lot more determination and political will is needed if we are going to stop sexual assault. Because, when we talk about sexual assault and things like that, they're also included in there is the sexual abuse of children. Very small children, incest, in their own homes by blood relatives and so on, in some of the schools and so on. So it's quite rife. And you hear, when we're going out into the communities, and we hear when people say, they talk about it. So what did you people do? What can we do? Where can we go? And then don't have the money to get onto buses and how many trips are they going to make to the to the city or the town to make the reports, and how many times and so on. So we need some one-stop kind of shops in the various districts.
Fantastic. We'll take another break and we'll come back with the final segment on Speak Your Mind. And we're back again. The final segment for Speak Your Mind with Shamima Ali, the coordinator of the Fiji Women's Crisis Center. We've got about a few more minutes with us, Miss Ali, before we wrap up Speak Your Mind for this week. I've got one more question before I want to talk just briefly about you. And that question basically is marital rape. I know this is also an issue that has surfaced in the recent weeks or months. Some may say, well, the husband is within his rights to have sexual intercourse with his partner, with his wife. And this couldn't possibly be an offense. Your response to that?
Definitely is an offense. If you look at the definition of rape, without consent, forced sex, and so on. So it is definitely, she is within her rights too to refuse sex. So they're both equal human beings. It's a partnership. She can say no at any time to any man, including her husband, her de facto, her partner, her boyfriend. She has every right to say no. And if he respects the woman enough, he will accept her refusal, because there's other ways to do, be happy together and so on. But where there is domestic violence, it is often accompanied by marital rape, rape within that marriage. It's about stamping ownership on the person, and how dare you refuse me. And this whole idea, as you said, the belief that once you are married, that's it, he owns you. You are his forever and ever, like his dog, his car, and everything else. So, that is the idea that is giving rise to this. And men actually believe, when I counsel couples on this, so what's the problem here? She's my wife, and then, he has to go through the re-education and so. But women are recognizing forced sex and rape within marriage.
Ms. Ali, how about verbal remarks? Could that be constituted as sexual harassment?
Yes, definitely. Or can I just say that marital rape is also a crime, so it should not be committed. But yes, of course, yes, remarks that have, with sexual innuendos, meaning double meanings and so on. Remarking on people's legs and boobs and bottoms and so on. A lot of people say, but I was only paying a compliment. A compliment is when you say, oh, Wame, you have a lovely shirt on, and then move on. And Wame is very happy and says, okay, thank you very much. Any woman, you say, you've got a nice dress on, you look very nice today, and move on. But when you say, but I also like what's inside that dress or inside that shirt, and I like the way it moves or things, then that is verging on sexual harassment. That is going beyond. That is not a compliment anymore. And when the other person feels uncomfortable and finds it offensive, that is what sexual harassment is. So, people joke here. There's a lot of itavalenis and tovus and different kind of relationships and so on. But there are limits to that also. There are boundaries within which you can do those things. And provided both are enjoying it. If the other person is finding it embarrassing, offensive, feels uncomfortable, stop it. That is sexual harassment.
Shamima, we're running out of time, but I do not want to wrap up this show without touching on a bit about you and talking about you for just a minute, because I know you've been a women's rights champion for years and years and years. What has ignited this passion in you?
Well, I actually grew up in a family where there was domestic violence, and so that actually made me determined to say that's not going to happen to me. And then I started looking around my relatives and saying there was a lot of this going on, and I just hated being bossed around and ordered around, I hated being confined to spaces. I always wanted to be sort of free at that time. So I became a teacher. I was a school teacher and so on. Then I worked in the media for a bit, in the other radio station and so on. And I went to England with my ex-husband. And then, that's where my eyes opened, and I started following feminism there and following I was a third world housewife looking after my husband, who was an academic. And so, but that's where my eyes opened, and I started following the feminist groups around, the radical feminists, the lesbian feminists, whatever, socialist feminists, and so on. And I learned a lot. And when I came back from there and joined the media, the crisis center had just been open about 5 months, and that's when I joined it. And, and that has been my vocation in life and my passion. And, it's just a strong sense of injustice and respecting people's human rights. I think that is what keeps me going.
Miss Ali, I'm sure you know that most men in this country aren't used to vocal women, women who are straightforward, who are in your face. What has been the response of most men, uh, really, when you enter a room or even when you do speak at events? Are they kinder towards you?
Well, things have changed since I started. I had a lot of things to, as do my staff, a lot of flack from people, home breakers, lesbians, and this, that, and the other. People would walk away. Even someone was telling me a few weeks ago at a wedding, a Muslim wedding, the imam stood up and said, "Don't go to that woman at the crisis center," and took my name and so on. So those things still happen, but there has been a lot of acceptance. And I always say the guys who have something to be frightened of, they are the ones who stay away from me. But there are many other men who have slowly, grudgingly, because I guess they see the success of the crisis center and where we've gone, and we've never stepped back. And we've been there in every field of human rights, upholding the rule of law, women's rights, everybody's rights. And I think that has some grudging respect has come around, and there are a lot of men who do have a lot of respect for the work that we do.
You're also a political activist.
Yes.
Seeing that next year Fijians will be going to the polls for the election, are you considering campaigning for a seat?
Well, I think the doors have been closed. I don't think I can. But no, I have never considered a political career. But what I do, because, someone has to be in the outside, critiquing what is going on. Once you're inside, it's a bit difficult to do that. But I definitely would like to form a movement that is based on human rights, rule of law, democracy, where it respects women and so on. And I would like to encourage young women particularly, but young men also, to enter the foray.
Miss Ali, that's all we have on the program today. She's the coordinator for the Fiji Women's Crisis Center, and the information on the Fiji Women's Crisis Center, or FWCC, is available on their website, which is www.fijiwomen.com. Miss Ali,
thank you very much.